Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at the first of the Planet of the Apes sequels, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and why it's an underrated masterpiece. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I still really enjoyed the movie, and if you want to know why, stick around, find out. People have been going ape lately because of the new Planet of the Apes movie that just came out, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Now, in full disclosure, I have not seen that movie yet because I don't want to cough up $25 to $40 to go see a movie that I can just watch on streaming in a few months' time. I already coughed up that money to go see the new Godzilla movie, so I had to kind of pick and choose my own poison here. I, too, have gone ape, and as I always go ape whenever a new Planet of the Apes movie come up, because I love all of the original movies. And these movies are a brilliant example of what America was like within the 1960s and 1970s. It does everything science fiction should, which is analyze who we are as people, done within a science fiction context, and that's these movies. These movies were like the Star Wars before Star Wars. Now, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, a lot of people, to put it bluntly, say it's nothing but a quickie sequel directed by TV director Ted Post. Ted Post, I just want to say, I think is an extremely competent director. One other film that he made that I rather enjoy is Hang 'em High, starring Clint Eastwood. I think that's a very well-made movie. This movie is often called a rushed sequel with a smaller budget and basically a Cliff Notes version of the first film. And it's just that, I will not lie. But I have to disagree with that notion when it comes to the second half of this film. This movie does have some serious pacing issues in that first half. Suddenly it's really fast, and then it goes really slow, and there's never an in-between. It never feels like it has the right pacing. It feels like there should be 10 to 15 more minutes in there that just aren't really there to flesh this stuff out. Beneath the Planet of the Apes ending is one of the most infamous endings ever put to cinema. I'd argue even more infamous and shocking than the original movie, and it haunts me to this day. I remember losing sleep the first time I watched this movie. I think I was in like 5th grade. It was playing on AMC, and it was late at night, and I saw the ending of this movie, having like the first one, and this ending gave me nightmares. Every time I watch that ending, I still get these really horrific chills because of how bleak and dark this is, which fits very much into the 70s zeitgeist of early 70s science fiction. Now, you can't help but wonder if you've seen that ending, and spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, the planet blows up and everybody you know from this movie and the previous movie are all dead. If only the mutants and the apes spoke to each other. But wonder that throughout this entire film, and that's a theme actually throughout the first two movies, a lack of communication leading to bad things. The mutants only communicate verbally when they sing to their god, as they say, and they choose eerie silence in an abandoned wasteland, which in itself sets up a wonderful universe that's absolutely bonkers, and one reason why I think the second half works so good while the first half is kind of really clunky. Also, I can't help but note that the Alpha and Omega bomb looks like an upside-down cross. Brent is better than he's given credit. He is, in some ways, a little more subtle than Taylor. His reactions to finding out the world was destroyed, that this planet that he's on is actually Earth itself. I like how his reaction to that isn't fury. Like reverence and somberness as he starts piecing it together and he starts talking to himself. And I think James Franciscus gives a very good performance in that scene in particular. And then there's, of course, his relationship to Nova, which is the opposite of the relationship between Nova and Taylor in the first movie, which is quite, at first, kind of creepy and purposefully done that way. And then you sort of warm up to it, and she kind of warms up to him, and he definitely to her as it sort of goes along. There's none of that in this movie. There is no real connection between Brent and Nova at all. He doesn't comfort her whatsoever throughout the film, and instead sort of just drags her along because she might know something that he doesn't, because she saw Taylor disappear in the opening of the film. And that's why Brent is here in the first place, to try to find Taylor. So of course he's going to drag her along. The only show of affection that Brent actually shows Nova throughout the entire film is when he tried to kill her. He actually shows some sort of form of total regret, and she is totally petrified by him, rightfully so, because she has absolutely no idea what's going on, and Brent knows this, and he gives a wonderful performance. But a lot of that I don't think is because his character's deep. He's not deep. He's a rather one-dimensional character from beginning to end, but I think it's elevated by James Franciscus's performance. Let's talk about Ursus. On paper, Ursus is a rather boring one-note character. There's nothing really in-depth to him other than that he's an angry gorilla leading an army into the Forbidden Zone. But it's elevated by James Gregory's performance. It's just so full of charisma, charm, and gusto. You can't help but every time he's on screen, you look to him.
The only good human is a dead human!
That's a quote I'll remember as long as I live. I will always remember James Gregory giving that line in that delivery. Ursus's makeup is, I think, the best ape makeup in the entire original movies and the shows. It's just so good. I mean, you compare the makeup for Ursus and the way how it moves and contorts with his face, and then you compare that to even General Aldo in battle. It's night and day different. Ursus's makeup is superior in almost every way, shape, and form. I don't know if it was the makeup that did that, or if it was James Gregory just really knowing how to exaggerate his facial movements so it could come off within the makeup itself, because that's what the actors had to do. I don't really know. I don't really care, because he does an outstanding job and the makeup looks fantastic. Now, I mentioned Nova earlier. I want to kind of circle back to her for a little bit, because I think she is perfect in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and arguably, I think the best part in this entire movie. Of course, her first and only words would be Taylor. And I adore that scene. That scene is so powerful. She's watching the two men in her life essentially beating each other to a pulp because of that mutant is making them do it. And he says that great line, that wonderful line.
We're a peaceful people. We don't kill our enemies. We get our enemies to kill each other.
That is such a scary and cold line, and the way how that actor delivers it is so terrifying, and I love it. Her eyes are so full of expression in this, and so full of fear and horror, and all done through no words at all, and the only thing that she yells is Taylor. The fact that it sounds hoarse, I think is a beautiful representation of like a child's first words. And this is the first sound she's ever made in her entire life, so her vocal cords have not been used. So personally, I think the decision to make it kind of slurred and really hoarse, I think it works. And it's all the more tragic that in the end, they can't save her. She's gunned down rather brutally in the next scene. This poor woman who's just been dragged around the entire thing, who has no idea what the hell's going on from beginning to end of this movie. And she just gets roped up in this crap, and she gets brutally murdered for it. It's such a sad movie. The ending of this movie is so bonkers. And her death scene is actually the only part for Taylor himself where I actually see him grieve. He hates humanity. He's completely selfish. He's abandoned his old life in the hope of finding something better than man. Instead, he finds a world of sentient apes who are just as prejudiced, just as scheming, and divided by class and race, and species in this case, and religion, as the world he was supposed to have left. It's really funny how he's like a terrible human being when you really get down to it, but we have to root for him because he's our only voice throughout the films. And again, this was all very deliberately done. To see him show genuine grief over the loss of Nova, and then that pessimism coming back within him again. No wonder why he makes the call in the end. You know, it's his decision to end up blowing up the planet itself.
Bloody bastard.
I love that line. I love the fact that that is the last line of the movie. But you see, me talking about Taylor there, and Taylor's relationship with Nova, that also exposes what I honestly think is the biggest problem with this movie. It's the fact that Taylor isn't in it. This is clearly Taylor's story, and I wish the film somehow was just able to stick with him throughout it. And that's because Charlton Heston didn't want to come back for this movie. And he still gives a great performance. That's what's crazy about the whole thing. But like when he gets shot by Ursus, and that grunt that he makes as he falls down and falls onto the steps, that really hurts. Like you feel it. And the way how Brent looks is the look that we give. I genuinely love that. And his scene in the opening with Nova, I really like his performance there, him teaching her how to say Taylor, you Nova, me Taylor. And I like how that ends up paying off in the end. And his final lines and pleas with Dr. Zaius, help me. I love that. It's all great stuff. And I think it's because, well, he's Charlton fucking Heston. That brings me to Dr. Zaius. Speaking of that, Dr. Zaius is a far more nuanced character in Beneath the Planet of the Apes than he was in the first film. I love him in the first film, don't get me wrong, but I love him even more within Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I like that continuation of his character, how he was the villain, if you really look at it, within the first film, and now he's far more of a nuanced character that still has a sense of morals. That scientist within him still likes to come out, still likes to peek its head out every once in a while, but he also still has to keep up this sense of society. And this is why the Ape Army is doing what they're doing, is in direct reaction to Taylor. The fear of Taylor has made Ursus gain power. And that's because Taylor started something which Zaius feared, which was a curiosity into the unknown. They don't know it, but they have inadvertently found the mutants. And we know that apes are going missing just because they're curious and they're out looking for all this stuff, and because they're asking questions, suddenly they're all disappearing. It's almost like Zaius has been driven into apathy by the end of this movie, and now that the fate of the apes is no longer in his control, he can try to steer it in the right direction, but it's beyond him. This military expedition is inevitable, and decides that if it is to happen, then it needs to happen there to preserve ape culture to the best that he possibly can, which again was, I think, is a genuine great continuation of his character from the first film. So when Taylor is there pleading for Zaius to help him, saying, we got to disarm this bomb, Zaius has a choice here. He can either help Taylor and stop the bomb, or he can double down, and he chooses to double down. Taylor, having been shot and mortally wounded, reaches out to Zaius, not in anger, but for help. Zaius, help me. Charlton Heston gives such a good performance. He's bleeding out. You hear the gunshots in the background. This whole sequence is just perfection, in my opinion. And Zaius has one chance to save his beloved Ape City, a thing that he supposedly has devoted his whole life to. The home he swore to protect. And instead of listening, he accuses.
Man is evil, capable of nothing but destruction.
And that's all cross-cutting with Brent fending off the apes in a doomed attempt to protect Taylor. I like how that Brent making that decision to reveal himself was, in a way, a reaction to Taylor being shot, only to then have Brent brutally gunned down after all he's been through, after everything we've watched through this. It's all for naught. He just gets mowed down by a stream of bullets. And only here, after failing to communicate, failing to bind old wounds, and bound to dogma and tradition, Taylor says his final words. And he blows up the world, ending the cycle. You know, he saw this crap when he was on Earth. That's one reason why he wanted to leave, was because he was sick of all this crap. He wanted something better than man out there. Only to then realize that, no, this cycle has just continued over and over again, except replace humans with apes. There's always going to be this conflict. It is an unbelievably pessimistic ending. War repeats, racism repeats, religious zealotry repeats. The humans did it, then the apes, and so did the mutants. There's only one way to bring this vicious cycle of hatred, violence, and destruction to an end, and Taylor does it. It is no wonder Fallout 3 took inspiration from this movie in more ways than just the children of the atom, because war never changes. In this entire end sequence, there's no music. There's no triumphant last-minute rescue. It's just a narrator, then silence as white credits on a black background roll, leaving you to just sit there in your own thoughts to try to comprehend the insanity of what has just unfolded on screen before you. And maybe, just maybe, you learn something from this. Through all the ape makeup and the crazy action and the weird set pieces, you can sit back and understand that this insanity is us. We are this world. We are insane and violent and selfish and unbelievably racist. We just are. That is what sci-fi does best, in my humble opinion. It makes us think about ourselves. It takes the fantastical and examines what it is that makes us, us. And that is certainly what Beneath the Planet of the Apes attempts to do. Doing it in the bleakest way possible, laying all bare, forcing us to watch what we could easily devolve into. And in the end, it won't matter. We'll all be dead. Unless we do something about ourselves first and foremost. That unless we stop and look at who we are as people, the bombs will drop and the cycle will continue. That second half of that movie is so fantastical, so insane, and such a subversion of the first half. It's almost so good I forgive all the problems within the first half, in my humble opinion. Because I think Beneath the Planet of the Apes is a much better movie than audiences and critics give it credit for. I will never forget the ending of this movie. Until the day I die, the ending of this movie will always haunt me. And reading comments on some of the videos talking about this movie, I'm kind of happy to see that people agree with me that, you know, for all the problems they have with the movie, they will always remember how freaking bleak this ending is, and I adore it. But I still love this movie, and I'm really glad to see that a lot of these Apes movies are getting a reevaluation with the release of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and that people are watching them again and sort of reassessing, in particular, the first 4 sequels, and starting to see them in a new light that I've always seen them in. I've always loved those movies, genuinely loved those movies, and it's not the nostalgia talking. And I hope you reevaluate it too, with everything that we've just discussed. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for watching. All of my social media is in the description below. In the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying sayonara.